HR leaders, what's on your mind these days? Is it AI? Is it the economy? The talent market? Remote work? Retention? DEI? Pay transparency? New laws? Our 2024 Workplace Trends Report outlines how HR leaders are thinking about these challenges and what they believe will help their organizations overcome them. Want to find out what they said? Head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/Workplace Trends 2024 and download the report to find out.
My guest today is a fascinating person. He is an inventor of Bose Noise Cancelling Headphones and designer of Apple's new product, Process. We talk about how to build a culture of innovation. And in my opinion, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. So stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tim Reitzma, the resident host of People Managing People. Welcome to the podcast. We're people managing people, and we want to lead and manage better. We're owners, founders, entrepreneurs. We're middle managers. We're team leaders. We're managing people, and yes, we do human resources. But we're not HR, at least not in the traditional sense. We're on a mission to help people lead and manage their teams and organizations more effectively. So if you want to lead and manage better, if you want to become a better organizational leader and more effective people manager, then join us. Keep listening to the podcast to find the tips, tricks, and tools you need to recruit, retain, manage, and lead your people and organization more effectively. And while listening to the show, please subscribe and join our mailing list on peoplemanagingpeople.com to stay up to date with all that's going on. Hey, John, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks very much, Tim. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I think I was following your journey and your story, and we've talked a couple times offline, and I think it's a story that will fascinate our listeners. So kind of keeping our listeners a little bit on edge of who you are and the journey you've been on. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your career and what you're up to these days?
Well, thanks for asking, and I'll do this, if you will, in Twitter length kind of summary.
Sure, yeah.
I've been always interested in science and engineering from a very small age. I was kind of a boy scientist and had my amateur radio license in high school and did all those sorts of things. Got an undergraduate degree in engineering and a grad degree from MIT in sound, essentially systems and acoustics. And I had the great opportunity to work with Dr. Amar Bose, who has the company named after him. Amazing person. He nurtured me and mentored me. I grew to be chief engineer at Bose, worked on the noise cancelling headphones and a number of other of our initiatives. I was really inkling to do my own thing, and so I decided to start a company in helping organizations innovate faster and more effectively. And one of our clients was Apple, and we help them create the Apple new product process, ANPP, which is used in all their divisions. What I call it, it's the guideline that I use is the least process necessary, but no less. So they have a light touch. And it's as simple as avoiding making mistakes second time. That's what I view the value of process. Anyway, did that for a good period, loved what I did because it's basically the application of science and engineering to bigger problems. And so helping companies do that has always been a passion of mine. I've also had some various opportunities in different areas such as investment banking and interim CEO work. So I've done a lot of different things. And then now what I'm doing is really I'm working in two areas. One is I'm on the board of Cirrus Logic, a public company in the semiconductor space, and they do audio chips, so it's related to my background. And I work with really great companies to help them innovate new products faster.
It's so fascinating. I'm actually just looking in my office. I have a little Bose sound system, and so it's an honor to be speaking with you. You know, as I know your name is on the patent for the Bose Noise Cancelling Headphones, and have really helped out in a lot of organizations. I mean, you mentioned Apple. I'm reading Amazon as well, and numerous other companies, and so we're People Managing People is a podcast for, effectively HR for non-HR people. And so people might be thinking, okay, well, how does this technology work, or this process work in HR? And I think it's not about the process. And I think you talk about that, right? So it's not about a process of innovation or a process for, growing an organization. It's often, we put a diverse group of people together, and we often hear it's like, okay, well, there's a process behind it. But is there more? Is there more than just the process?
Yeah, and I think that is a misconception, Tim. In the work that I've done, and it's you have to compare it to your own experience to see if it's relevant. What I found is process is one of the least important things in innovation. I think the two most important things are, believe it or not, one is funding, i.e., to really be given the resources to nurture a creative spark into a flame. So, it does not have to be a large amount of money, but it has to be some money. I don't know, maybe 10% of, let's say, all of your product teams, or 10% of your business level. So a material but not overwhelming amount. And the second is great people, having really great people. And if you have people, and if you have the resources to stand behind them, you can really innovate at any scale.
Yeah, I think about innovation from a product standpoint, but I also think about innovation from a business standpoint. Right, businesses need to evolve, need to effectively change with the times. We've talked about remote work. There's a lot of innovation even in how to manage people in that space, and so. I'm a guy who studied operations, and it's a lot about process improvement, right? Studying process. We got to look at the process, and often we'd come up with a great process and it would fail.
Yes.
And so what I'm hearing is, well, we need to get the people on board. We need to have people in the right place and buy in and create a space for them.
Yeah, and you said something really interesting, which is innovation can occur outside the product space. I want to highlight that 100 times.
Okay.
And my experience in our work at Bose was very much that we would go after simultaneous innovation in marketing and distribution at the same time we would develop products. And a really great example of that is that when we were trying to first sell the Bose radio, we found it very difficult to actually go to market because our distributors were, these big box retailers kind of around the world, and they're totally into fast-moving consumer products where people walk up, they look at a shelf, and they pick one and they buy it. Well, what happens if you're selling a product that costs 10 times as much as the best product that they have? And you can only experience the differentiation if it's demonstrated to you. Mm-hmm. And we knew that wouldn't happen in the large retail environments. And so we innovated in marketing. And we had a whole bunch of failures, Tim. We first tried, believe it or not, door to door.
Wow, really?
Exactly. So talk about a head snap difference in distribution. Well, that failed. And we'll come back to that failure because that's another secret of success. The second thing we tried was direct mail, putting in inserts in the Wall Street Journal and a number of papers. And that actually didn't work so well. But then we tried working with Paul Harvey, who was this nationally famous announcer who had a regular weekday show on AM radio broadcast all over the country. And we worked with him, and that did it. And
wow.
we therefore, and this gets back to your question about, how do organizations with smaller or no dedicated HR functions deal with innovation? A couple things. One is to make sure you nurture innovation in all parts of the company. Innovation can occur anywhere. And the second is, and the lesson that we learned in that whole process is, it's okay to fail. Because if you're innovating, you're going to fail. And if you don't fail, you're not innovating enough. So coming back to culture and the importance of really embracing failure is just an outcome that you can learn from, is another really important aspect or lesson that all companies of all sizes could benefit by.
That's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that story of, the journey of Bose, where it's not just the innovation of the product, but okay, how are we going to get this, seemingly a lot more expensive product into people's hands, and fail along the way. And I think of failure as, I don't necessarily like the word, but it's a data point. It's okay, what did we do? What did we learn from this? And to ensure that we don't do it again. If, as you said, a mail order, if it doesn't work, you're not going to try it on the next product. And if you do, then maybe there's something wrong in the organization. But I love what you said about nurture innovation everywhere. And how do it seems easy to say, but is it easy to do?
Well, no, it's not. It's hard. So we talked a little bit about culture and learning from failure and allowing failure. So that's super important. The second thing I think is a legitimate challenge that innovators in all parts of an organization have to consider is that businesses do certain things. They're there for a reason. There might be a vision or a strategy that's in place, either written or implicit. And a lot of innovators kind of lose the line of sight to the strategy. And the biggest place I've seen innovation fail is where innovators all over the company, but good innovators, come up with ideas that don't relate to the business. And so if you have an idea, and as we described, you need to invest in that idea, you've got to make sure that you can have a line of sight between that innovation and the business itself, so you can make a difference for the owner or the investor or customers. And so oftentimes I think innovation just is sometimes exciting ideas, but it has to be useful. It has to make a difference. And I think that's one of the challenges. The other is focus. And this was another lesson at Bose. When I first started there, I was working on 2 programs. And after a couple months, I went back to Dr. Bose and said, we're making really good progress on the headphones. And this other research program we're working on is really going slowly and it's difficult. And we had this conversation, and we agreed we're just going to work completely on the headphones and drop the other program immediately. And we didn't hedge our bets. We didn't correct the second program on loudspeakers. We didn't postpone it. We didn't try to do it on a drip. We just stopped it. And that, we could have been wrong. But I think, Tim, one thing that people do is they have innovation like peanut butter, and it's spread over everything, and they don't focus on something that will really make an impact. And so, Tim, I think it's really important to be successful to focus your idea, really focus and hone it.
Yeah, it's I've been part of teams where somebody throws out an idea, and all of a sudden it seems like it's a new project within minutes. And we've got somebody who's running with the idea to go and research it, and it may not be even tied to the goals. I worked at a tech company for many years, and often we would throw different ideas, and not necessarily product. I wasn't on the product team, but different ways of doing business. And so we talk a lot about offering space and being okay to nurture that innovation. And so, you mentioned kind of before the podcast about ideas are fragile. And I'm sure you've got experience of that with Bose and maybe even creating the Apple's innovation process. But what does that mean? Ideas are fragile. And how do you then take it to that next step and maybe take that, an exciting idea into something?
Yeah, great question. And this is where a little process is very useful. So this is absolutely true at Apple, and Jonathan Ivey, their head of UX and UI, at the time really mentioned and emphasized the fragility of ideas, and that how close they come to the trash can almost every day. And in companies, unfortunately there's a tendency to push back on new ideas, say, well, that's not really what we want to do, or you're going to fail because this won't work or that won't work. So there's a tremendous amount of negativity that can occur in organizations. Not all, but it's a challenge. And so how do you deal with maintaining the focus on that, which we talked about, that idea? And so the way I like to envision it is that you have, if you will, a protected space. It doesn't have to be a physical space, but it needs to be maybe a virtual space. Examples that I've heard of is that innovators that are really focusing, trying to work on an idea, all their electronic communication changes. So they take them off the company Slack channel. They don't invite them to team meetings, all hands and so forth. They create a virtual skunkworks and protect this idea and its creator. And the second thing that they do, this protected space, is it keeps bureaucracy away from the teams. Like fill out this form, do this. That's not how we work here. So the protected space is a space at which you basically suspend judgment, you suspend the rules, and you trust. So this is where the trust comes back around to being so important here, is you have to trust the passion and the drive and the creativity of an individual who's really wants to run with an idea. Now that doesn't mean they've got a carte blanche. So in this protected space, what I recommend for quote unquote process is lightweight. One is that they write down their idea on a piece of paper, and demonstrate it, how to move the needle and how it's aligned with the company. And so you have a way of some person looks at these ideas. So you need a process to attract and curate ideas in a very short form. That's one thing. Second thing you need to do is you need to have what I call a graduation criteria. In other words, how do you move from this protected space of sandbox into the real world to launch this idea or unleash it in the company? And the second step of the process is you need to have some degree of doneness demonstrated. In other words, you've had customer contact, you've had a function that it might affect, say, yes, this is a great idea. You've taken some of the risk out of it because you've done some experiments. But the idea is really only two steps you need some way of filtering the ideas to ensure they're big and they're aligned with the company. And the second filter you need, or process step, is the basically demonstration that it's ready to go in the real world and be absorbed by the company.
That's fascinating. It actually brings back a memory of, again, working in a tech company, developing products, and I managed a sales organization, and we would often get, effectively a new product from product management or engineering, and saying, "Okay, go sell this." But yet we really had no idea what even the product was and how it fit with the organization, and we've seen a number of product failures in that. And yes, it costs money, right? If it's way out of touch with a customer. Yeah, there's a cost to it. Yeah,
and Tim, what you mentioned here is a very real problem, and I think the reason there are these two process steps are really important. The second process step, which is kind of graduation out of the protected space, and in your example, being a new product or service that would be sold by the sales organization, you need to figure out an entry plan into the organization. And often that takes place by encouraging you and your peers in the sales organization to be part of giving the inventor some feedback around their idea. And also saying, if we're going to ever sell this, you've got to do X, Y, and Z, and not learn that too late, like the experience you had.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've mentioned now a couple times through the conversation culture, workplace culture, and then you mentioned another keyword that's really top of mind for me is trust. So, often I hear organizations say that we're fast. We got to have speed to market, and don't derail that plan, or don't derail the plan to get to market. So how do we create cultures of trust and a culture of innovation?
It's hard. It's hard. I think the trust is something that is earned. It's not suddenly appear or promised. But trust is what we need to do to be successful in our jobs, and the relationship we need to have with our managers. If you look at the typical project, it can be in any domain, in any size company, but you've got a project manager and you've got a few people working on something. Well, it's really important that the project manager is trusted by the leadership of the organization. And so you actually have this delicate balance, because if the project manager, or in this case, the innovator, is not trusted by senior management, they're going to start micromanaging you and being in your face all the time, which is counterproductive. So you need project managers and innovators that actually know how to set expectations and meet them. And I think that's one of the first and most important things, is the notion of setting expectations and then meeting them. And I think if you do that repetitively, you will build trust between yourself and the organization. Culture is kind of a bigger thing, but there's one area that I think is an opportunity for all organizations to do. And like trust, culture is built, if you will, over time, much like dust accumulates over a shelf. It just accumulates very, very slowly, and one bad breath can blow it away. So it's fragile. This culture and trust is very fragile. But I have found that organizations don't use every possibility to message the culture in any action or activity. For example, if someone leaves or if someone joins, use that as an opportunity to reinforce the culture of the company, and do it constantly. And much like advertising, culture has to be repeated and repeated and repeated and built over time. There's one other thing that I think is really relevant here. This kind of brings us back to our whole discussion in a broader sense about what's valued with the organization and alignment and so forth. And that is, it's very important for the leadership to describe what their product vision is. In other words, why do this organization exists? What are its dimensions of competition? How will the organization be successful? So you have that let's say goal in mind, and in the organization, if they meet it over time, trust is developed. And so it's a slow process, but it can be nurtured by using any little day-to-day action to reinforce and communicate the trust to your whole team.
That's fascinating, and I'd love to hear maybe an example from you, and maybe put you on the spot a little bit about how did you see this happen within maybe one of your clients? You don't necessarily need to give a name, or at Bose.
Yeah, so I think there are many opportunities to do it, but I think the biggest ones are in org changes and hiring and firing, because those all are really important. They're visceral to the team. They're dramatic and they're palpable. You can feel them, or sometimes you can be affected directly by them. And I have seen at Bose is really good at this, is that when there is a change, there's always a portion of the communication in either a town hall format or an email that talks about how this action reinforces the culture and the vision for the company. So that when there's a reorg, for example, at the end of the communication, there's just an expression of how this reorg will reinforce the goals and the culture of the organization. So the two biggest places I've seen it has been in reorg announcements, and the second is in the departure of people. And the hiring of people, basically changes in staff. And so the nice thing about it is those kind of things occur relatively frequently. So you have an opportunity to reinforce the culture by those two actions related to people and organizations.
Yeah, thanks for kind of going down that little trail of thought with me, and because I think it's important. We can have great organizations who say they're innovative, but we need to get down to the core of an organization. Yeah, I've seen numerous organizations who have value written on their website of innovation, and I'm always curious about that because I think organizations we need to be innovative in order to continue to succeed in the market. But it comes down to that communication internally. It comes down to the culture, that vision. And, for me, a value written down means it gives us permission, gives an organization permission and people in the organization permission to ensure that innovation is happening.
Yeah, and I think in the cases maybe you've observed, and certainly where I've observed, there's this, there's people in the organization are waiting for management to blink. They're really like, did they say it again? Is it reinforced here? Because if they give lip service to, innovation to the marketplace external, but don't, walk the talk back in the organization, the team members are always looking at management, testing them, saying, do they really believe in innovation or is it lip service? And so, that you really need to earn that trust by repeatedly delivering the promise of having innovation. And in all organizations it's recognition, and the thing about recognition, Tim, is it doesn't cost anything. But man, you mention someone's name in a public announcement or a large town hall meeting or whatever you've got, that kind of reinforcement really, for innovators, really gives others the permission to do the same thing in the hopes that they'll be at the front of the room and talked about as well.
I love that. I think it's something that organizations, even myself, need to grab hold of and do more of. Right now I'm working in an organization as a people and culture leader, and so I'm not looking at necessarily product innovation, but this organization that I'm part of is changing rapidly. So we need to change our process. And I think if we approach it not just as like, okay, we're evolving, but let's innovate. Let's use this as an opportunity to drive interesting and new ideas. And so how do you then assemble a diverse team? Or whether it's a product, and I'm sure that I'm really curious about Apple and their design process. Is it just engineers or is it a diverse team?
Oh, in all cases, in all organizations that are effective, it's got to be a diverse team. So, Tim, I believe in a simple concept called the team wheel or the core team model. And the idea is for a team to be truly high performance and deliver well, you need to make sure that you have all the functions at the table in a meeting of minds on the order of a weekly cadence, where you bring together different perspectives and different needs and interests. If you don't do that, as you said earlier, you can waste a whole bunch of money because you get to the end and then someone says, "Hey, did you consider this?" And it's like, "Oh my God, if I had known about that at the beginning, I could have easily accommodated it. But now it's just too late." And a great example I had at a tech company recently is in this whole area is they're very, very interested in measurement and as they call it, instrumentation. So they do web apps and mobile apps. And I saw one program actually fail because they didn't put or allow for instrumentation. So the company actually couldn't see how it's used and be given feedback. So that was an example, excuse me, where this customer success member of the team really wasn't fully part of the team from the beginning. In fact, Tim, I would say without exception, the execution success is indicated by having a core cross-functional team that works on a program and makes sure that all the requirements of all the different organizations are satisfied.
I think that's such a valuable lesson, and hearing it from you, who's been working in large organizations and small organizations for your career, to hear that yes, innovation doesn't necessarily happen in a vacuum. We need to be assembling cross-functional teams and reaching out to different levels of organizations. Doesn't matter if you're 10 people or 1,000 people. But ideas can happen anywhere, and as also feedback in innovations can happen anywhere.
Yeah, and I want to put a fine point around this topic, Tim, because I think there's a misconception about teams and innovation. And I don't think what we're talking about is counter to that. But I would say in general, the creative spark, the fragile new idea, is generated by a very small team, meaning 2 people, most likely 1, 1.5, 2, up to 3. So I'm a strong believer that true invention is not a team sport. But that's just the early part. Mm-hmm. After that flame, that spark turns into a small flame, then you need a cross-functional team to make it happen, to execute. Because innovation is a combination of 3 things. The first is you need that creative spark. The second is you need a vehicle to turn that creative spark into something useful. And that's where the cross-functional team comes in place. And then the third area is where we began our podcast discussion, which is it needs to be aligned with the company and really move the needle. So you need a creative spark, you need a cross-functional team to execute it, and then you need to really make sure that you deliver this to the company, to your customers, that moves the needle and makes a difference.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, often, at least with me, I'll sit around with a couple friends or maybe one friend and we just start talking about, I wish this product did X, Y, or Z, or I wish this product existed in the market. And it's like almost that little spark. And that happens within organizations as well. And I think that's where, we need to be able to allow that protected space to see if that product or that idea can actually turn into something, as long as it's aligned with an organization, right? And if it's not, then maybe it's an opportunity to go and branch out and develop your own product or service. But thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and this is again where the process comes about that I think can be very useful, because if basically we talk about meeting some criteria in a one-pager that really sanctions this idea, that then triggers the cross-functional team. So it's a very easy and simple mechanism to say, all right, you've got a good idea here for sure. Now let's put some people around it and see if you can deliver.
Yeah, that's great. And I thank you for sharing your journey and a bit of your story with Bose and with Apple and in your career. And so, I'm wondering if somebody's listening to this and has some questions, how can they reach you?
I think the best place is just to go to the website, TCGEN, technologycapitalgeneration.com, and reach out to me there.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation, John. I know I think I say this on every podcast that we could go on for well over an hour, I'm sure, on this topic. And just to kind of wrap it up, it doesn't necessarily innovation happens within organizations, and doesn't necessarily focus on product. It could be innovation of a process. I know it's that the process isn't don't focus on the process, but it could be. It's how an organization can evolve, but really it starts with the culture of trust and allowing that space for innovation to happen. So thanks for taking us on this journey.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure, Tim. Obviously, I love this topic, and thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. So
thanks.
Take care.